Atif Sheikh with Program Inclusive. In this program, we talk about disability inclusive development. It's how we can include people with disabilities who are the citizens of Pakistan in the overall development process. In previous programs, we have discussed about education, health, political participation, IT, and many other issues which affect the lives of people with disabilities in Pakistan. According to a recent report, 16.6 million children with disabilities are still out of school. What are the reasons? Schools are not ready for them, they are not inclusive, they are not accessible, or special education centers are not enough to cater this large number of children with disabilities who has to be in the school right now. To discuss about this issue of inclusion of children with disabilities in the mainstream schools or how to make education inclusive in Pakistan, we have a very eminent educationist and managing director of Silverwalks Schools, Mr. Hassan Sattar with us. Welcome, Hassan Saab.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Hassan Saab, actually we have seen your work. We have been including children with disabilities in your mainstream school networks all over the country. It was very interesting that even most of the public-funded public institutions are not thinking of it. So how do you define inclusion, or how do you deal with the matter of inclusive education?
For me, intrinsic to the understanding of inclusion is recognizing and celebrating diversity. An interventionist education program focuses on activity-based teaching, which is linked to basic inner values of respect, acceptance, tolerance, equity, fairness, and inequality. Developing an understanding of an equal right to a fulfilling life for every human being requires breaking down of barriers of bias and stereotype while focusing on diversity. So inclusion is right. I mean, there's a very famous saying, in a case against Board of Education, inclusion is right, it's not a privilege. It says it's not a privilege for a select few, but the understanding of diversity and then looking at inclusion is what an education program needs to accomplish, and that's what we are focusing on.
So, like children with disabilities, as I mentioned, like they are still out, a large number of children with disabilities, they are still out of school. And Article 25A of Constitution of Pakistan says that the primary education is the right of every child. But what are the challenges? Why they are not included in the mainstream schools or even the special education system?
Let's look at the situation in Pakistan. I'm going to go through three facts. Persons with disabilities are unaccounted. As a society, we are apologetic, we feel sorry, we want to give charity, we want to give money, we want to feel good about it, but we are apologetic, we are ashamed, we hide people who weren't born what we think is normal, and we discard them.
So this is the first barrier, like attitudinal barrier. Because of this attitudinal barrier, children with disabilities are still uncounted.
Absolutely. And here is a number. A British Council report said that they estimated there are about 30 million persons with disabilities in Pakistan. 30 million. That is 14% of the population.
Exactly.
Our official figures say that there are 3 to 4 million. How in the world are we going to do anything about it with that being the disparity between official figures and what the reality is? But these are persons with recognizable disability. Let me give you an example. Any estimate for policy making won't be correct. So there is there is no work, there is no research on this topic, and therefore there is no law. In Punjab, they made a half-hearted attempt at saying, 3% of your workforce should be persons with disabilities. If 14% of the population is are people with disabilities, how is 3%? So it's completely uninformed. But let me talk about something that I have done extensive research on and wrote a paper on, which is acquired disability. So in urban Pakistan, I was told in 2011 by a friend who's a doctor and a PhD in public health. We met after a long time, we went to school together. And he shared some data with me, and it was startling. There is absolutely no research in mental health. So in urban Pakistan, there was one research paper which was done in 2004, which said that 34% of the people in urban Pakistan suffer from some form of mental health issue due to the inability to deal with stress and frustration.
You're very right in saying that we don't have any research on particularly the social model of disability. The most of the research is based on the medical process. Here we will take a break and we will continue this point. Stay with us. Yeah. So the research you mentioned, it was in 2004, I think.
Yeah. So 2004. The next research is in 2015, which shows that now that number is 39%. So 34% is 1 in 3 people. 39% is very close to 40. So in 1.5 in 3 people. So or 1.4 in 3 people.
Yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with you. And the points you mentioned very interesting, like attitudinal barrier is the first barrier that people don't want to send their children who are disabled to the school, or if they are willing to send them, schools are not ready to accept. Schools are not prepared to accept, like teachers are not ready or environment is not ready. The second issue is like uncounted. They are still uncounted, but whatever policy you plan, you need some numbers. So when you don't have numbers, you can't make it. So what are the other challenges? Like why private schools are not accepting children with disabilities?
Here is when we talk of inclusion and when we talk of diversity, think about the overall society in Pakistan. Old and young, they are excluded. Women are excluded. Persons with disabilities are excluded. For one segment, persons with disabilities, OECD estimates that 70% of the employable population of persons with disabilities is unemployed. It is not mainstreamed in the society, and that is costing Pakistan 15 billion pounds or $20 billion a year. That is one segment. Now think of, so cost of exclusion has to be understood to hone and to absorb the value of inclusion. This is not political correctness. This is key for growth. That is the sort of level for understanding. So with no research, no law, no understanding of cost, how do you expect that the country is going to move
capital
forward?
Perspective, from the capital point of view, they should be considered as a market, and which is like their assistive devices are not available or infrastructure is not available because they are not considered as a potential market. You're very right that if we invest on these things, they can be part of the business as well. So what you have been contributing to address this issue, as is your organization or as a person, what you have done in the last few years?
My journey with this need for inclusion started when I was in the corporate sector, and I was in Singapore doing a course on business goal management. One of the objectives of the course was to take persons with disabilities out for an outing, and so we had to organize that plan. And
it was a volunteer activity
for outdoor activities. So that's when I first came close to the issue.
We have to take a break here. Stay with us. We will continue. Yeah, thank you. So it was very interesting point that prepare the society for accepting the diversity, then it will be easier to include who are marginalized. So that's what you are doing.
Yeah, so that was the second phase. So this is on educating the normal, right? Now, so some action had to be done, and given that I've invested so much time and this is such an important subject of overall education, in last year we wanted to, having gained this experience and having gained this understanding, we said, okay, now it's time for action. So we opened our first international school in Dubai. It's a preschool. It's called Canadian Oaks Kindergarten, and it is fully inclusive for cognitive disability. So behavioral disability, or you've got some speech issues and whatever. And because I want to understand firsthand, before looking at scaling this, I want to understand firsthand what does it take. So that's kind
so are you planning something similar in Pakistan now?
and yeah, so that's where we are heading, right? It's a phased process. So now we've got a beautiful, our in fact biggest campus in G13, and having learned what we know about curriculum design, what we know about the impact that an inclusive school has on those families, on those kids, and the difference it can make, timely intervention, the difference that it can make. So we are now planning to open, to launch a fully inclusive school, so not just with cognitive disability, but actually physical disability as well. So a school which would have facilities, and so in curriculum, what we don't understand is that somebody who doesn't have eyesight,
Okay.
Can perform twice as much on things which require listening. And one of the biggest gaps in our society, and particularly our culture, is we are not willing to listen. We're here to respond. So just think about that. If we can, somebody who can't see.
It's all about facilitating the environment.
Absolutely. So that, and it's a journey, but it's a lifetime commitment. We decided that we've got to do more.
This is one example, like as a private organization you are implementing, but what about the policy level changes? What do you suggest at the national scale?
First of all, as I mentioned, we've got the society, and particularly the government and the state, needs to understand the cost of exclusion. They need to frame the challenges. One size does not fit all. Somebody who can't see versus somebody who can't hear versus somebody who can't walk. A friend of mine was in New York, as you know, you are that friend, the grocery store guy didn't look at you and looked at your company person and said, your credit card isn't working, and you said, is my nose running? Now that is an example. So the government needs to, and the policymaker needs to understand, frame the issue. So that's one. Then we need to map the social support system. From parents to basic education. So parents are the first people who deal with this. They need to be educated, then the basic education system, then advanced skill development, then integration into the society. It is a process of handoffs. And then the action plan required is three-tiered. One, I've talked about sensitizing and education. We've got to remove the stigma. We've got to make sure that sensitization of diversity and inclusion is mandatory part of our curriculum. We have a social security platform. I don't know if you've ever witnessed what kind of hospital social security offers, but there is a lot that can be done using that platform. There is the infrastructure there. How you use that, so that's what the government needs to think about. And then skill development, basic education, assessment is required. Again, one size doesn't fit all. So what sort of intervention is needed, and then there have to be quantifiable targets at all levels. So it's not feel good. It has to be quantified. And to inspire the nation, a project needs to run which looks at examples of people like Helen Keller.
I
and
completely agree with you that
we need
this
to
is
inspire the
this
nation.
is not a one-time project. It's a systematic approach we need to adopt. And very rightly said, Hassan Saab, that cost of inclusion is much less than cost of exclusion. If we think about the infrastructure facilities, we can include children with disabilities in the same schools. Hassan Saab, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
See you next week.